When an iceberg tore a 350-foot gash in the hull of the Titanic, she went down in less than 3 hours. But was there more to the disaster than meets the eye?
There's something about the story that makes absolutely no sense whatsoever.
Was it an accident, or was it a crime?
They were businessmen, and they would make money by hook or by crook.
Is the ship at the bottom of the Atlantic really the Titanic?
Almost a century after it sank, the Titanic continues to fascinate us. Exhibitions of items lifted from the wreck, like this one in Manchester, attract tens of thousands of visitors. But now a new theory's emerged, which could turn everything we think we know about the disaster on its head. And if it's true, it'll mean that none of the items on display here even came from the Titanic at all.
There is something strange going on. And the more you look at it, the more convinced you become that there is, at least maybe we don't know quite what at the moment. We don't know quite what yet in the story, but there's something very, very strange going on.
There was no attempt made at all to save that ship. It was almost as if they wanted it to go to the bottom.
Could it be that the Titanic was switched with its sister ship, the Olympic, and that it was the Olympic which was sunk deliberately as part of the greatest insurance scam in history?
The Olympic becomes the Titanic becomes the Olympic. This is the most common form of marine fraud, even today.
The Olympic had been badly damaged in an accident. Was an insurance fraud the only way for the owners to get their money back?
What we're looking at basically is two ships which are exactly the same. To the average person in the street looking at them from a distance, they would simply have no idea which ship was which.
It was a midnight on the sea, the band is playing, you're my God today. By the Titanic, very well.
Our story begins on the other side of the world, in Brisbane, Australia, and it begins with a tale told by a dying seaman called Paddy Fenton, known to everyone as Paddy the Pig.
He was a hard old man, you know, like he's one of the last windjammer seamen, you know. Paddy told me like he was the ordinary seaman on the Titanic, and that the iceberg did not cause the sinking of the ship and that there. What he said it was that they'd had a fire in the bunkers, and the fire had been burning since they loaded the bunkers.
Paddy's claim was bizarre and extraordinary. He said that as ice-cold water rushed in, it reacted with a bunker fire in the bowels of the ship to cause an explosion. It was this, rather than the initial collision with the iceberg, which sank Titanic. But Paddy had a second, even more astonishing claim.
Paddy Fenton did say that there were rumours among the crew that the ships had been switched, there was an insurance scam going on.
The logic was this. The Olympic was unusable and uninsurable because of its accident the year before. But if the ships were switched and insurers thought it was the Titanic which had sunk, then they'd be happy to pay up in full.
With the insurance scam, Paddy said that it was a big cover-up, because when they got back to port, the a company official came down with a man from the British government out there, took the crew aside and swore them all to secrecy under the Official Secrecy Act. I think the only reason Paddy was telling me is because he was getting old and that there, and I think he just wanted to clear his conscience. The thing that haunted him the most was the women and children, their screams.
Paddy's stories seemed outlandish, absurd even, as you might expect from someone who walks around calling himself Paddy the Pig. But then, in 1985, came a discovery which would transform the study of the Titanic.
On September the 1st that year at 12:50 a.m, an American submersible in the North Atlantic began picking up strange images on its underwater cameras. Within minutes, the crew realised they'd made the greatest underwater discovery of the 20th century, the wreck of the Titanic. It lay 2.5 miles down and was broken into 3 pieces. And there, in the side of the ship, was a hole, just where Paddy the pig said it would be.
The plating is pushed outwards. It's not where something's hit the ship. If it was iceberg damage, when the ship had struck something solid, the plating would have been pushed into the ship, not outwards.
The thing with Paddy the pig is that unless you knew that that was true, you couldn't have made that up.
There is no way that Fenton could have known unless he was on the ship and saw an explosion.
Perhaps Paddy wasn't mad after all. Could his story actually be true? I decided to head off to the scene of the crime.
I'm standing at the Harland and Wolff shipyard in Belfast, and it's on this exact spot that the Titanic and its sister ship, the Olympic, were built. Now, conspiracy theorists claim that the 2 ships were switched as part of a massive insurance scam. And if it's true, then the switch would have happened right here.
The 2 ships were built side by side on giant gantries. They towered over the city. The Olympic was the older of the sisters, launched a full year before the Titanic in 1911.
The class leader of these ships was in fact Olympic. Very, very famous ship in her time, the biggest ship in the world, the largest man-made moving object on Earth. All the rest of it, that was all applied to Olympic. Titanic was the second of the class.
John Parkinson's father worked as a carpenter on both ships, and John is perhaps the last man alive to have seen the Titanic.
Oh, it was a wonderful, wonderful experience. See, I was just a wee boy, between 5 and 6 years of age when I saw it. My father brought me down here on a Sunday afternoon, and he took me round to see it. And there it was when I looked at it. I was afraid in case it would fall on me. It was so big, it seemed to reach the sky.
And what did the Olympic look like?
Oh, it was a lovely ship too. You'd hardly known the difference between the 2. They were sisters, you see. Aye. Very like each other.
Then John told me something that intrigued me.
Oh yes, there were rumours that the ships had been switched and all sorts of things. And
So this theory's been around for a very long time.
it has, yes.
Do you remember anyone saying it to you back in the old days?
Oh yes, you hear wee bits of rumours about that, you know. But that was a lot of nonsense. It was the Titanic.
It was clear the conspiracy theory was as old as the disaster itself. And although John was dismissive, I was curious. I wondered what secrets might lie hidden in Belfast.
Have you got a call lined up there, Sean?
Jerry Anderson has his finger on the pulse of Northern Ireland. If I wanted to reach the people of Belfast, I knew he was my man.
Earlier on today, I mentioned the fact we're going to be talking about Titanic. I've got 2 gentlemen with me who are from a station, a TV station that is not the BBC, and they're making a programme about the Titanic. What's the crack?
Well, it's basically about Titanic conspiracy theories, and there's one main theory we're looking at, and that is that the Titanic wasn't the Titanic at all.
Right.
Now, you're looking at me like I might be a bit odd.
No, I know you look a bit, but that's neither here nor there.
I promise you there's more to it. Essentially, the Titanic, and I'm sure many of your listeners are aware of this, had a sister ship called the Olympic. And the people in charge came up with a plan, and that was to swap the Olympic with the Titanic.
All right, so the ideal thing for you would be if someone rang this programme today and said, listen, funny enough, I remember my grandfather coming into me and saying, do you know what happened that last night? I came out to work for the Titanic, and it was a different ship.
Exactly, yeah, no, that would be absolutely perfect. You know, I'm not pinning my hopes on it.
Absolutely. Someone on the line here already, I don't know who it is. Jim? Good morning, Jim.
Good morning.
Yes, Jim, have you any connection with the Titanic at all?
My partner's grandfather actually worked and built the Titanic. Basically, it wasn't Titanic, it sank.
It wasn't, did you say?
Yep.
Wow, how do you know that?
It's the Olympic, it sank. He swore on, I think, the sister ship.
Are you serious?
Yep. White Star Line, there were financial difficulties, and that's the only way they could claim and get themselves back on track.
I mean, that seems to go with what I've been hearing. I was hearing that the White Star had some financial difficulties, especially with the Olympic, so they couldn't get any insurance money for the Olympic, so that's when the swap took place. Does that kind of fit with what?
Yes, it does.
Right.
This was becoming more intriguing by the minute.
Jack Johnson wanted to get on board. Captain, he says I ain't hauling no coal. Fancy Titanic, very well.
If the Titanic and the Olympic were switched, then the trail of events which led to the disaster began here in Southampton on September 20th, 1911, with a collision between the Olympic and the Royal Navy cruiser HMS Hawke.
The problem White Star had with the Olympic kept hitting things.
The Olympic is pulling out of Southampton. It's on its way to America. And HMS Hawke is a faster ship. It's passing on the starboard side, on the right-hand side.
The two ships found themselves on a converging course, and neither was able to take evasive action fast enough.
The Hawke was a vintage 19th century battleship which was fitted with an underwater ram.
And this thing was there, actually, to do as much damage as possible to any other ship she managed to ram in the side.
The Hawke cut an enormous double hole in the side of the Olympic, the ram below the waterline and the bow above the waterline.
Nasty. And if you think the Olympic looked bad, you should see the Hawke.
Everybody on board felt the impact. Glasses were knocked off tables. People were knocked off their feet.
They slapped together a makeshift repair in Southampton, but it wasn't till the Olympic had limped back to dry dock in Belfast that the full scale of the damage from the Hawke's underwater ram became clear.
When she got back to Belfast, this repair, that had taken a fortnight at Harland and Wolff's Southampton yard, had failed. What this tells us is that for the back end to flood, and for these steel plates beneath the waterline to have been moved, the hull has to flex to tear the rivets out. Well, if the hull is flexing at that point, there can only be one reason: the ship's back's broken. Effectively a death sentence for the ship.
Harland and Wolff has always denied the damage was on this scale. But this diagram, only recently released by the firm, shows hull plating had to be replaced along the entire length of the ship. Not just in the stern where the Hawke had struck.
Strange enough, the forward end of that diagram almost exactly duplicates the supposed damage to Titanic, damage that supposedly sank Titanic on the night of April 15. It's a coincidence, and I don't like coincidences. Quite possibly, yes, quite possibly that was a weak spot on the hull.
Was the Olympic a write-off?
The ship they got was just a couple £100,000 worth of scrap iron.
Was the White Star Line about to go down the tubes?
Something has to be done. These men are desperate.
Could they really have been prepared to contemplate the drastic solution Paddy the Pig claimed? To switch, then sink their own flagship? A dying seaman had told an apparently far-fetched story that the Titanic had been swapped with her damaged sister ship, the Olympic. But the Olympic had been damaged in a collision the previous year with the Royal Navy cruiser HMS Hawke, perhaps more badly than the company acknowledged.
All of a sudden they've shelled out all this money on a ship which is now useless. It's never going to pass another Board of Trade inspection.
And to make matters worse, they'd get no insurance payout. The Royal Navy had investigated the Hawke accident and found itself not guilty. Steamliners were a multi-million-dollar business. They catered not just for the rich and the famous, but also for the hundreds of thousands of migrants pouring across the Atlantic to America.
Olympic and Titanic are, in fact, the White Star Line's survival strategy in the very, very competitive North Atlantic trade.